Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Became Jackal Anubis? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya, a small 4-year-old boy with a bush of green hair, sat in shock as the doctor informed him he was quirkless. Tears streamed down his face as he grappled with the weight of his shattered dreams of becoming a hero. His mother, a gentle woman, held him close, her own heart breaking as she whispered apologies. Though he appreciated her concern, it was not what he needed to hear in that moment. After thanking the doctor, the Midoriya family left the office in silence. As they drove home, Izuku stared out the window, lost in thought. Suddenly, their car was jolted by a large black truck that collided with them, sending their vehicle rolling. When Izuku opened his eyes, he felt disoriented and sick, realizing he was upside down. His mother lay still beside him, barely conscious. Desperate to escape, Izuku struggled against his seatbelt, but before he could free himself, the door swung open. A group of individuals wearing strange bird masks loomed over him. Dizziness washed over him, and darkness enveloped his vision as he lost consciousness. When Izuku awoke, he found himself on a hard metal table, unable to move his arms or legs. Panic surged through him as he tried to scream, only to discover he was gagged. A voice broke through the silence, announcing that it was glad to see him awake. Izuku turned to see a man who appeared indifferent, but his eyes betrayed a sense of excitement. The man introduced himself as Chisaki, but instructed Izuku to call him Overhaul. Izuku nodded, feeling a wave of dread wash over him. Over the next 10 years, he endured a harrowing existence filled with painful injections and brutal encounters with creatures known as Nomus, which Overhaul had created. On his 14th birthday, a voice called out to him, waking him from a restless sleep. A man entered his cage, announcing that he had a gift for Izuku. He shoved a small girl with silver hair and red eyes into the space, telling Izuku he could do as he wished with her, as long as she remained unharmed. Anger surged within him as he stepped out of the shadows, revealing his transformed body, a result of countless experiments. The girl cowered in fear, pleading for mercy. Izuku, moved by her distress, knelt down and introduced himself softly, trying to reassure her. She revealed her name was Eri and explained that her quirk was a curse that had caused her family to disappear. Izuku, feeling a deep sense of empathy, asked if she would want to be rid of her quirk. When she nodded, he reached out, finding her quirk and merging it with his own, granting him control over it. That evening, Izuku resolved to rescue Eri from Overhaul's grasp. When he was instructed to bring her to a specific room, he smiled gently at her, assuring her everything would be all right. As they entered, he set her down and turned to face Overhaul. He expressed his discontent with Overhaul's treatment of Eri, and as he activated another quirk, time froze. Seizing the moment, he stripped Overhaul of his powers. When time resumed, Overhaul lunged at him, but Izuku unleashed golden flames that consumed him, reducing him to ash. With a sigh of relief, Izuku took Eri's hand and set the building ablaze, walking away as it burned. He had finally freed himself and rescued the frightened girl. After Izuku and Eri escaped the Shai Hasaki's base, Izuku wandered around town. He had taken all the money he could carry in his pockets and a duffel bag he found. Walking down the streets, Izuku came across a small 2-story house, its walls in disarray, the grass overgrown, and the paint peeling. An old, broken-down car sat in the driveway. As Izuku stared, a nagging feeling of familiarity filled his mind. He was about to walk away when a short, green-haired woman stepped out of the house. Her appearance was sadly disheveled. Izuku's eyes widened as a sense of déjà vu washed over him, and he unconsciously walked toward the woman. The woman, sensing his presence, looked up, her dull green eyes piercing his own neon green ones. She stammered, expressing her concern about debt collectors, but her words faltered as the strange figure with a jackal-like face hugged her. As she spoke, her soft voice brought back a memory of a skinnier green-haired, green-eyed woman. Izuku realized who she was and hugged her tightly, calling her name. Inko, confused at first, soon recognized her son. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw the glowing green eyes she had missed so much. Overcome with emotion, she hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face as she exclaimed her joy at finding him alive. Before Inko could bombard him with questions, Izuku interrupted her with a firm hug, suggesting they go inside to talk. Once inside, he explained everything from his kidnapping and experimentation to his escape, carefully omitting the more distressing details for Eri's sake. Inko held it together as best she could, relieved that her son was free and safe. Curious about the state of the house and the debt, Izuku asked Inko for an explanation. She sighed and shared how, after his disappearance, she had struggled to work following an accident. It took nearly 2 years for her to leave the hospital, and by the time she was released, rumors of her being targeted by villains had spread, making it impossible for her to find work. Izuku's anger flared as he read the documents detailing her contract, which stated that she would be charged an exorbitant interest rate, effectively robbing her of her funds. Determined to help, he assured her he would take care of the situation and asked Eri to stay with her grandmother. With a plan forming in his mind, Izuku decided he needed a new outfit. He headed to a local costume supplier known for its discretion. The shopkeeper, who had a quirk for creating clothing, greeted him. Izuku requested a costume that would instill fear yet remain practical. As he admired his reflection, he felt a connection to a figure he had once read about, Anubis, the keeper of the scale of the heart. After paying the shopkeeper, he left the store feeling empowered. On his way home, he spotted an Egyptian staff in another shop window and purchased it as well. When he returned home, his mother gasped at his new appearance. Sitting down, Izuku explained his quirks, demonstrating his ability to reshape and repair the walls of their home, leaving Inko in awe. He expressed his intention to become a vigilante, vowing to protect others so that no one would suffer as they had. Inko nodded in understanding, offering her support as they shared a heartfelt. Standing up, Izuku looked at the afternoon sky, announcing his intention to patrol the area. He hugged his mother once more before using his quirk to create a lower floor with a secret entrance, ensuring he wouldn't be easily tracked. Aware that he would always be on a watch list due to his mutation, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. With determination, he began his first patrol as Anubis. As he walked through the streets of Mustafu, Izuku noted the lack of heroes in the area. Suddenly, he heard a scream from an alley and rushed toward the sound. He found a young man lying on the ground, injured, while a woman desperately tried to stop the bleeding. The woman cried out for help, explaining that the police would take an hour to arrive. Izuku introduced himself as Anubis, offering his assistance. The woman looked at him with a glimmer of hope. He presented the injured man with 3 options: to rewind his body to before the attack, to heal him with no scars at the cost of extreme pain, or to offer a prayer for a peaceful passing. The woman gasped, horrified at the choices laid before her husband. The man, unable to speak, raised his hands to indicate his choice. Izuku nodded, preparing to help, but he gently advised the woman to close her eyes, knowing the process would be difficult to witness. She hesitated but ultimately complied. With determination, Izuku placed his hand on the man's chest, ready to use his quirk to save him. His screams echoed as his body slowly broke apart into small cubes before completely reforming. Shocked, the man and woman looked at Izuku, expressing their gratitude. They bowed to him, saying they appreciated his help. Izuku smiled, revealing his canines, and assured them that he was just doing his job. He stated softly that he would be protecting the area now, and soon it would be safe once again before continuing on his patrol. It had been almost a month since Izuku returned home and became a protector of Mustafu. Criminals and villains opted to work behind closed doors to avoid being caught, which soon became a concern for the police chief. Tsukachi, the lead detective, decided to call a friend for assistance in this case. As he relaxed in his seat, his office door flung open, and a sleep-deprived man walked in. Tsukachi greeted Aizawa with a tired smile, happy to see him. Aizawa gave him a look and grumbled under his breath, inquiring about the vigilante. Tsukachi led Aizawa, also known as Eraserhead, toward the interrogation rooms, explaining that he would provide details on the way. He handed Aizawa a crude drawing of Izuku, identifying him as Anubis, the god of the underworld. Tsukachi explained that more criminals had been coming in with the same description, and Aizawa nodded in understanding. Entering the interrogation room, Aizawa faced a small-time criminal involved in petty theft. Tsukachi asked the man to explain what he had seen, and the man nodded, recounting his experience. He spoke of a god who granted him mercy in exchange for turning himself in, mentioning how Anubis had returned his partner to the cycle of reincarnation. Aizawa remained unimpressed by the story. As they left the room, Aizawa noted that the reports indicated children and teens had been turning up at hospitals and orphanages with amnesia, unable to remember anything beyond their current age. Tsukachi confirmed that this was happening in Mustafu. Aizawa nodded, determined to find the vigilante. He jumped from roof to roof, taking a break when he heard a small gathering at a nearby restaurant. A woman spoke about how Anubis had saved her husband, offering assistance when help was far away. Aizawa listened intently as she described the figure as a jackal, emphasizing that it was a real god there to protect them. Aizawa thought to himself that the figure must have a god complex. As he prepared to leave, a man stepped out of the shadows, trailing the group. Aizawa decided to intervene and jump down, but he soon regretted his decision. After defeating the man, he relaxed, only to be caught off guard by another attacker who aimed to stab him. Aizawa felt the knife pierce his chest, and as he coughed, he realized he was in serious trouble. Izuku was walking down the dimly lit streets when he heard someone coughing from an alley. Staying in the shadows, he peered down the alley and saw a man in black clothes with a white scarf around his neck. Using a new quirk called Injured Eye, Izuku realized the man had been stabbed and was in critical condition. He decided to help, as he had done many times before. Aizawa was startled from his thoughts when a black mist began to swirl around him. As the mist rose, a figure adorned in golden clothes and holding a golden staff emerged. Aizawa recognized the jackal-like face of Anubis. The figure knelt beside him, noting the injury and offering to help with 6 options. Aizawa, though grumbling, was curious about what Anubis could do. He requested assistance, following the earlier conversation he had overheard. Anubis provided several options, including healing him, which would erase all scars but come with pain. Aizawa chose the second option, eager to experience the pain as a pro-hero. However, he quickly realized he had underestimated the intensity of the healing process. As Anubis's hand touched him, he felt a surge of pain as his body transformed into cubes before reforming. Panting, he found himself healed. Anubis stood up and moved to the center of the alley, warning Aizawa that Mustafu was not a safe place for heroes or civilians. He identified himself as the Guardian and instructed Aizawa to call for him if he ever needed assistance. With that, Anubis disappeared into a cloud of mist. Aizawa resolved to report this encounter to Tsukachi, glancing at the video recording on his phone. A week had passed since Izuku met the pro-hero Eraserhead, and Aizawa had not returned to Mustafa since. Izuku's night patrols had been quiet lately, and while he was relieved, he also felt cautious. He cherished the time spent with his self-proclaimed daughter, especially considering his unique form. His last encounter with a villain had been particularly unusual. The villain had a rare transformative quirk, using it to disguise himself as a police officer to rob the citizens of Mustafu. When Izuku learned about the situation, he set out to find the man responsible. He discovered him in the local park, intimidating a couple of teenagers and demanding their money. The 2 teens, no older than 16, sat on a bench, visibly shaken and stripped of their belongings, including some expensive clothing and shoes. The man, known as Anubis in his vigilante outfit, used his smoke quirk to appear behind the perpetrator. Grabbing the man's shoulder, Izuku swiftly threw him to the ground, knocking the wind out of him. Before the man could recover, Izuku approached him, neutralized his quirk, but left him unchanged in age. He returned the stolen money and clothes to the teens, who expressed their gratitude before fleeing, leaving Izuku to focus on the man. Izuku sensed that the man was not stealing out of malice but out of desperation. The man felt remorse for leaving the teens without their belongings, especially the boy without shoes and the girl, who was only slightly older than his own daughter, without a shirt. Yet he was in dire need of money to feed his family. He had been taken aback when the teens, initially paralyzed with fear, suddenly snapped out of it. He was even more surprised when a hand landed on his shoulder, and he found himself thrown to the ground, breathless. As he slowly sat up, he saw a dog-like creature returning the stolen items to the teens before crouching down in front of him. The creature began to speak, asking why he had resorted to theft. The man explained his situation. His family was struggling financially, having taken a loan from a group that had left them homeless after taking everything they owned. His daughter required blood for her quirk, and the costs were overwhelming. Izuku felt sympathy for the man. He was aware of the existence of loan sharks and despised their actions. His thoughts drifted to his own daughter, Eri, and he realized he might have acted similarly if he were in the man's position. He offered a gentle smile and asked for the man's name. The man, taken aback, introduced himself as Toga Shin. Izuku then proposed a deal. He explained that he had a small family and a young one he cared for, Eri, who could benefit from having more people in her life. He invited Toga and his family to live with him, emphasizing the need for secrecy. Toga expressed his gratitude, overwhelmed by the offer. Izuku instructed Toga to return in an hour with his family, and Toga hurried off, leaving Izuku smiling. It wasn't long before Toga returned, carrying a pale little girl and accompanied by a woman. Izuku inquired if they were his wife and daughter, to which Toga confirmed. He introduced his wife, Toga Hiro, and his daughter, Toga Himiko, both bowing in appreciation. Izuku smiled and took their hands, leading them to his home. Inko emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray with glasses of tea. She introduced herself and her granddaughter, Eri, with a warm smile. Izuku observed as the two families exchanged greetings. Inko looked at Izuku with concern as Toga explained Himiko's quirk. She asked if he could help, and Izuku nodded. He placed his hand on her forehead, reached into her, and combined her quirk with an infinite stamina quirk before returning it to her. Instantly, her complexion returned to normal, and she stirred. The rest of the evening was spent as the two families got to know one another. Shortly after dinner, Izuku's ears perked up as he sensed someone calling his name. He announced that he had to leave, as a pro-hero had entered his territory and vanished into a swirling mist. Aizawa was grumbling to himself. It had been a week since he first encountered the Vigilante Anubis, and he had rushed back to the police station to inform Tsukachi about his findings. He entered his office without looking around, eager to share what he had uncovered. It wasn't until he heard an overly cheerful voice behind him that he realized he had made a mistake. Aizawa turned to face his boss, Nezu, who expressed his pleasure at Aizawa taking on the case. Aizawa suppressed a groan as he inquired about Nezu's interest in the Vigilante. Nezu explained that he had been monitoring Mustafu for some time and was eager to meet Anubis. He asked Aizawa if he knew how to contact him, which Aizawa confirmed with a heavy sigh. He promised to arrange a meeting after dealing with his class that week. Nezu's excitement was palpable as he clapped his hands and confirmed their plans to meet in a week. The two shared a knowing look, both realizing that if Nezu, known as the Rat God, wanted to meet the Vigilante, things were about to become very interesting. The week passed quickly, and Aizawa met Nezu at UA. He allowed Nezu to climb into his capture weapon before leaping from rooftop to rooftop until they reached Mustafu. After ensuring the area was clear, Aizawa let Nezu perch on his shoulder. Nezu inquired about how to contact the Vigilante, seemingly testing Aizawa's knowledge. Aizawa explained that he just had to say Anubis's name for him to appear. Taking a deep breath, he called out the name in a low, almost whisper-like tone. After a moment of silence, Aizawa looked around, feeling a hint of disappointment. He mused that perhaps Anubis had used that as a means to evade capture. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts, causing Aizawa to jump. Anubis had appeared, having been listening all along. Spinning around with his capture weapon at the ready, Aizawa faced the voice to find Anubis standing there. Aizawa acknowledged Anubis with his usual flat tone, expressing his gladness to see him again. Anubis returned the sentiment, inquiring about Aizawa and the Chimera's presence. Allowing himself to introduce, Nezu, the principal of UA, stepped forward, and Anubis gave a slight bow in response. Anubis expressed his relief at seeing Nezu alive and well, recalling their last encounter during a visit to Doc's labs. Nezu's eyes widened in surprise as Anubis mentioned the designation C-666, prompting Nezu to question if they had met before. For the first time, Nezu found himself at a loss for words. Anubis confirmed their past meeting, revealing his identity. Izuku approached and whispered a name into Nezu's ear, causing Nezu's eyes to widen even further. Memories flooded back to Nezu from 8 years ago, when he had been destroying the lab where he was imprisoned. He recalled hearing about another group conducting experiments and rushing to find them moving a small boy labeled as a Nomu. The boy had only glanced at him for a brief moment before he escaped, leaving Nezu with a lingering sense of regret. Nezu stammered in realization, but Anubis reassured him that he held no ill will. They exchanged soft smiles, acknowledging their shared history. Anubis then inquired about the purpose of their visit, prompting Nezu to clear his throat and explain their intentions. They were there to discuss Anubis's age and his potential desire to become a hero. Anubis stood tall, contemplating the question. He revealed that he was 15, almost 16, and expressed his view that he was already a hero to those living in his area, questioning the necessity of formal heroism. Nezu nodded, explaining that Anubis's unique appearance prevented him from going out freely. Attending UA could grant him a license and the freedom to explore the world. Anubis considered this, stating his requirements for joining. He wanted his friend's daughter, who was turning 16, to be accepted, and he requested that his daughter and mother be allowed to live on campus. He also insisted on maintaining his current job, as the people he protected relied on him. Nezu exchanged glances with Aizawa, who shrugged in agreement, suggesting that keeping Anubis's family in his class would allow for better oversight. Nezu smiled, proposing a deal with one stipulation: they would need at least 1 hour a day to enjoy tea and converse, as a way to support each other given their shared experiences. Anubis chuckled, accepting the terms and asking when he could start. Nezu instructed him to bring his family on Sunday to get everything arranged, with classes beginning on Monday. As the conversation concluded, Anubis mentioned he needed to pack. Nezu remarked on the interesting year ahead, while Aizawa groaned, hoping Anubis wouldn't be a problem child, especially with the current number of students he was managing. Izuku smiled as he made his way home, looking forward to UA and the celebration his mother would have for him. The journey was relaxing, with only a few minor interruptions from small-time criminals. However, the world had other plans, as he was soon drawn to the sound of crying women. Following the noise, he ventured down a dark alley, where he found 2 teenage girls huddled together. One girl was shielding the other, who had several cuts and appeared to be in distress. This was a tragic reality in the area, where attacks on women and children were all too common, and Anubis was determined to put an end to it. What shocked Anubis the most was that the girls were wearing UA uniforms. As he approached, he noticed a van filled with young women, all chained and likely victims of trafficking. Growling in frustration, he dissolved into mist and reappeared in front of the girls, blocking a group of 5 men who were attempting to capture them. The sudden appearance of Anubis startled the women, causing them to scream, while the men recoiled in fear. One of the men shouted his name, and another, presumably the leader, rallied the group to attack. Anubis stood tall, his gaze piercing as he presented them with 2 options: surrender or face the consequences of their actions. The men exchanged glances before bursting into laughter, dismissing Anubis's warning. However, one of them charged forward. Anubis swiftly intercepted him, grabbing his head. A faint green glow emanated from Anubis, and in an instant, the man's clothes dropped to the ground, leaving behind a small movement that hinted at something more sinister. The men exchanged fearful glances before their boss growled for them to charge. With a heavy sigh, 3 more men vanished, leaving only the boss and Anubis. Anubis growled, presenting the man with an ultimatum: surrender, turn himself in, or meet the same fate as his men. The man, trembling, resigned himself to his fate and decided to turn himself in. Anubis, with a feral smile, instructed him to go to the police station, warning that he would know if he didn't make it there. The man nodded and hurried off. Turning to the 2 ladies nearby, Anubis knelt down and introduced himself, asking if they were all right or injured. They checked themselves and one replied that they were fine, just missing some clothes. Anubis nodded and handed her a hoodie from a pile of clothes that now held 3 infants. He urged her to put it on and help the other women, assuring her that the police would arrive soon. As sirens echoed in the alley, Anubis vanished in a cloud of smoke. Back home, Izuku was greeted by an excited Eri, who eagerly asked if they could go out. She reminded him of the masking quirk he had mentioned. Chuckling, Izuku picked her up, transforming into a normal-looking version of himself. He agreed to take her to the fair, noting he could maintain this form for only 2 hours. Eri squealed in delight and practically dragged him out of the house. The trip to the fair was peaceful, with people on the streets admiring Eri's cuteness. After a short walk and train ride, they entered the fair. Eri enthusiastically played every game and rode every ride she was allowed on until an alarm sounded on Izuku's phone. He informed Eri that it was time to go, and though she pouted, she complied. As they walked down the street, Eri stopped to look down a small alleyway, where she spotted a young man covered in scars. Concerned, Eri softly asked if he was all right, surprising the man. He dismissed her, warning her that the area wasn't safe for someone like her. Eri puffed her cheeks and insisted that she wanted to know if he was okay. The man chuckled and shrugged, admitting he was as fine as someone with a self-destructive quirk could be. Eri offered a reassuring smile, telling him that her father could help him or leave him behind. She mentioned how Izuku had given her and Toga a home, and Izuku chuckled at her words. The man, intrigued, asked if Izuku was some kind of god, as only a deity could fix his situation. Eri replied that she didn't know if he was a god, but he was a hero who had saved her from her quirk. The man looked at her and then back at Izuku, shrugging in resignation, agreeing to whatever would keep her from pestering him. Izuku introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya and told the man he would soon abandon the name Todoroki. The man's eyes widened in surprise as Izuku presented him with 4 options: to be left to rot in the city's underground, to have his wounds healed and receive a home, to be healed but left behind, or to have a complete restart on life without a guarantee of escaping his past. After contemplating, the man chose the second option and leaned back against the wall. With a nod, Izuku transformed into Anubis. Anubis declared that from that day forward, the man would be known as Midoriya Touya. He placed his hand on the man's chest, a warm light flowing through him. Expecting pain, Touya closed his eyes. But after a few moments, the sensation vanished. When he opened his eyes, he was astonished to find his scars had disappeared. Overwhelmed with emotion, he hugged Anubis tightly, whispering his gratitude before losing consciousness. Izuku smiled at the light boy in his arms, noting how light he felt. He could feel the boy's ribs and sighed softly. He then told Eri it was time to take her new brother home. Eri nodded, gripping Izuku's pants tightly as they were enveloped in mist and reappeared at home. Izuku called for his mother, informing her that he had brought another stray and asked her to contact their informant to change the boy's name to Touya Midoriya, formerly Todoroki. His mother nodded and rushed to make the call. Touya stirred at the smell of a home-cooked meal, his stomach growling in protest. He got up to find Izuku standing at the door with a bag in hand. Izuku greeted him, expressing his happiness that Touya was awake. He explained that he had to leave for school but would return afterward. He also mentioned that Touya's girlfriend had been worried about him and had called in sick to help him recover. As memories of a certain blonde flooded back, Touya felt a soft smile form on his lips. He recalled how they had kept each other warm during their time together. Just then, Toga rushed into the room, tears in her eyes as she embraced him. Izuku quietly left the two to reconnect, catching Touya's gaze as it flicked to a box on the nightstand. Chuckling at the blush on his cheeks, Izuku grabbed his bag and left for Yua. A smirk crossed his face as he vanished into smoke. Nezu was having a good day. Today was the day the infamous Vigilante of Mustafu was going to show up. Anubis, also known as Izuku Midoriya, was a rare oddity that puzzled him. He had done everything to search for him, but nothing had come up. He remembered that fateful day he had escaped, leaving the boy behind. With a sigh, he looked up and expressed his hope that Izuku held no resentment toward him. To his surprise, a voice replied. I hold no resentment for you, my dear friend. Jumping onto his desk, Nezu watched as a swirl of black smoke appeared and disappeared, revealing Anubis with a smirk on his canine features. Midoriya, Nezu began, but a scowl formed on his face. Izuku, just call me Izuku when we're alone, Nezu. We are more alike than anything, Izuku said with a smile, and Nezu nodded in agreement. Well then, Izuku, how can I help you? He asked, and Izuku's grin almost rivaled Nezu's. I wanted to scare Class 1A. I was hoping you could inform Aizawa, he stated, and Nezu smiled, agreeing to send a quick message to the tired teacher. With a nod, he looked back at Izuku. So what do you have planned? He inquired, and Izuku smirked. Just watch the cameras. Before you say you don't have them, I know you have a flair for the dramatic and chaos, so I know you have them in every room except the obvious ones, he asserted. Nezu grinned in response. Fine, get going then. Aizawa's waiting, he said, ushering Izuku out with a mischievous grin. Izuku walked to Class 1A and knocked on the door. He could hear Aizawa's voice behind it, announcing a special new student, the Vigilante Anubis, and instructing the class to show respect. After quieting the students, Aizawa called for Izuku to enter. Izuku smiled and acted nervous, shy, and meek. Aizawa looked shocked before sighing and muttering under his breath. As the sound of shuffling feet and a camera moving was heard, Izuku introduced himself. Hello, I am Anubis, he stammered, stealing his features. The class erupted in chatter. What? That's Anubis? I thought he was a dog, shouted a red-haired boy. It must have been a mask, a girl with frog-like features said. I remember him being more intimidating. He saved us, but surely this is a mistake. That can't be the same guy from that night, a girl with a ponytail remarked. Izuku thought about the girl, recalling that she was one of those he had saved. He noticed another girl with purple hair and ear jacks, looking timid yet determined. Another weakling I can crush under my boot, an ash-blonde boy scoffed. Hey, Bakugo, calm down, the red-haired boy replied. A boy with peculiar purple features spoke up, causing Aizawa to stiffen. He knew Anubis disliked inappropriate behavior and became concerned for the boy. Less competition for the girls, more to touch, the boy said, drooling on his desk. The girls flinched, looking disgusted and worried. Slowly, black smoke began to fill the room, dimming the lights and blocking out the sun. Izuku stood tall, which confused most of the class, as his skin seemed to shift. His arms and legs turned black, appearing to grow in size, while the bright golden outfit of Anubis began to glimmer. The transformation continued, revealing a jackal-like face. A staff member was pulled from the swirling mist, and where Izuku once stood was now Anubis. He approached the boy who was trembling in fear and reached out, grabbing him by the head. His eyes flashed red, and Anubis looked disgusted. You shall pay for your actions, he declared, turning to Aizawa, who caught his glare. Aizawa's eyes widened as unsettling memories flooded back. He quickly grabbed the boy, preparing to take him to Nezu's office. Just then, the intercom activated in Class 1A. Tsukachi is on his way. Take him to I-1, the voice announced. I-1 was an interrogation room with a single entrance and a key card. I thought he expelled 3 of you. He should have stayed gone, Anubis remarked quietly to Aizawa. Nezu had me reinstate those 3, but it did work somewhat, obviously not well enough, Aizawa replied softly before picking up the boy. I'll be back. Ida, you're in charge, he ordered before leaving the room. After Aizawa departed with the boy now known as Mineta, the black mist dissipated and the room brightened again. However, Izuku did not return, only Anubis remained. The class immediately began discussing him, asking questions, which he answered briefly, sharing only his name, age, and a simple explanation of his quirk. Anubis, the ponytailed girl began, and Izuku turned to her. Just Anubis is fine, he replied with a smile. My name is Momo, and this is Jirou. We just want to thank you for yesterday, they said, and Izuku smiled softly. I'm just glad you two are all right. Did the other girls receive help? Momo nodded. Yes, we released them and assisted the police as best as we could. Jirou's quirk helped with triage, and I created items they needed, she explained, and Izuku's expression shifted as he listened intently. Did they evaluate you, or just wave you off afterward? He asked, ready to take action if necessary. With a nod, Momo smiled warmly. Jirou was examined and then I was too. They also provided us with food and water, she explained, and Izuku's face brightened once more. After a while, Aizawa returned and handed Izuku a syllabus. All right, now that we have everyone here, he began, but was interrupted by a blue-haired boy, Ida, if Izuku remembered correctly. Sir, how can UA allow a villain in here? He questioned, and Aizawa sighed. First, Ida, he was a vigilante. Second, I know some of his history, and if you had to go through it, you would be a vigilante, if not worse, he explained, and the boy sighed, taking his seat. Anyway, as I was saying, now that we have everyone here, we will be going to the USJ for rescue training with 2 other pros. Aizawa looked around, spotting Kaminari, who had raised his hand. Before he could respond, a black mist pulled his hand down. Anubis explained that they were headed to the unforeseen simulation joint, causing the boy to blush and drop his hand with a nod. Aizawa informed Anubis that they would be going there on Friday and asked if he had rescue experience. Anubis confirmed he did, prompting Aizawa to express hope that he could assist his students during the training. With that, Aizawa resumed his lecture. The first day of classes concluded quickly. As the bell rang, students exited the classroom, animatedly discussing the upcoming rescue training. Ida approached Izuku and questioned why he was following them. With a soft chuckle, Izuku explained that he would be living on campus and had already set up a dorm room. Ida scoffed and entered the dorm, where most of the class had yet to speak with Izuku but were not unfriendly. The quietest student, Koda, asked if Izuku knew who he was, to which Izuku nodded. He introduced his dorm mom, Enko Midoriya, along with his daughter Eri and brother Touya. This sparked a flurry of questions from the class, which Izuku and Inko answered as best they could. Soon, everyone had dinner and went to bed. The following day mirrored the first, with Izuku receiving the cold shoulder from most of his classmates. Only Mina, Momo, and Jirou engaged with him. Frustrated, Izuku considered leaving but decided to stick it out a bit longer, hoping to bond with them over the weekend. Finally, the day of the USJ arrived. Izuku watched as everyone boarded the bus, admiring their costumes until Momo approached him. He fought back a blush as her costume left little to the imagination. Momo asked if he wasn't going to change into his costume, and Izuku cleared his throat, mentioning that his ability to change form was useful. However, his expression turned serious as he instructed her to meet him in his dorm after they returned to work on her costume. Before Momo could respond, Aizawa called everyone to disembark. As they entered the USJ, they were greeted by the space hero, 13, who began her lengthy speech. Izuku felt a tingle of unease and suddenly shouted for everyone to return to the bus. As his classmates ran, Ida stood still, questioning why they were listening to a villain. Just then, the lights went out. Izuku reached the door, only for it to close just before he could escape. He slammed against it and turned to see the main plaza filled with villains. Aizawa grumbled but jumped into action. Izuku was about to follow when Kurojiri appeared, stating that they could not allow anyone to escape and warned them to avoid a painful fate. As Kurojiri attempted to warp them away, Izuku raised his hand but was too late, watching as half the class vanished into the dark mist. 13 lunged to attack Kurojiri, who redirected her strike. In a moment of desperation, Izuku pushed her aside, feeling pain shoot through his back. Kurojiri, in a panic, rushed back to Shigaraki, apologizing for failing to stop 13 and mentioning that one student had managed to escape. Shigaraki, frustrated, scratched at his neck, lamenting that if Kurojiri had completed his task, they would have defeated the mini-boss before facing the main boss. With the distraction, Aizawa, also known as Eraserhead, fought through the low-level criminals to confront Shigaraki. However, a massive black beast intercepted him, and within moments, Aizawa was slammed into the concrete floor, suffering severe injuries. Seeing this, Izuku rushed forward, ensuring he appeared injured and weak, though he was genuinely hurt. Shigaraki mocked him, viewing him as an easy target. As he approached, the same ominous black mist enveloped the facility, and a dark voice echoed throughout. All students and villains froze, fear washing over them. In the final moments of their existence, the voice declared that they would face judgment. A swirling mass of smoke rose from the floor, dimming the lights. As the class prepared to fight, two glowing neon green eyes emerged from the darkness, revealing a jackal's face, and the voice echoed once more, proclaiming, "Anubis." Shigaraki, having just defeated Aizawa, felt a surge of excitement, believing victory was within reach. However, his confidence faltered when smoke filled the room, and the chilling phrase of death resonated throughout the building. His shock quickly transformed into fear, then anger, as he commanded his Nomu to disregard Izuku and focus on the new threat, Anubis. Confusion gripped Shigaraki as he questioned why a low-level player like Anubis was present. Tsu had just returned to her classmates, who were all staring at the green-haired boy, Midoriya, as he descended the stairs. Quickly, her instincts heightened, urging her to flee as the black mist surrounded her, and Anubis emerged. She was among the few classmates who didn't harbor resentment toward his presence, choosing to reserve judgment until she learned more. She soon noticed the deep injury on his back and the distressed body language of 13. Anubis was fighting despite his injury, and 13 acknowledged this with a nod. He had taken the attack meant for her and then collapsed. The entire class watched as Anubis leaped into battle, swiftly taking down minor thugs. When Tsu saw Nomu targeting Anubis, she extended her tongue to pull Aizawa back to safety with the group. As the class observed, Anubis and Nomu exchanged powerful blows in a prolonged and grueling confrontation. Suddenly, a sinister laugh echoed through the room. Shigaraki boasted about his creation, revealing that Nomu was equipped with shock absorption, regeneration, and super strength, declaring that only All Might stood a chance against it, and even then he would perish. With a confident smile, Anubis addressed Shigaraki, indicating he had been holding back. He then warned the class to look away before activating his Overhaul quirk and seizing Nomu. In an instant, Nomu's body expanded and burst apart, leaving a gruesome aftermath. At that moment, All Might burst through the doors, witnessing the Vigilante's decisive action against a villain. Just as he prepared to intervene, Shigaraki acted first, grabbing Anubis and causing his arm to decay into dust. All Might rushed to punch Shigaraki, but the villain vanished into a portal, leaving Anubis injured. Quickly, All Might placed a quirk suppressant bracelet on Anubis's wrist, causing him to scream as his quirks were nullified, allowing him to feel the pain he had previously been shielded from. Unfortunately, Izuku's Nomu status meant he was slowly deteriorating. All Might carried the screaming Vigilante to Recovery Girl's office, securing him to the bed. While standing guard, Recovery Girl entered, her face paling at the sight of the severe injuries staining the bed red. Anubis was in agony, and All Might appeared unbothered. He informed Recovery Girl that he had brought the Vigilante and requested her to heal him, promising to take him to the station afterward. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, the sound of small footsteps echoed in the room. Nezu's voice interrupted, firmly stating that All Might would do no such thing. He had witnessed All Might rushing to the office with the injured student in his arms. Relief washed over him until he activated the microphones, the sound of Anubis's screams sending chills down his spine. Understanding the pain Anubis was enduring, Nezu's gaze fell on the quirk suppression bracelet, connecting the dots. Izuku Midoriya was a Nomu with multiple quirks, likely possessing a pain nullification quirk and a health sustainability quirk to ensure his survival as a bioengineered Nomu. Nezu hurried to the clinic, his anger simmering as he approached the door. Hearing All Might's voice, he couldn't contain his frustration. He asserted that All Might would not proceed with his plan, directing Recovery Girl to remove the bracelet. With a nod and a glare from All Might, the bracelet was removed, and Izuku immediately quieted down. He weakly requested to be taken outside, and with Chiyo's concerned look, they wheeled him to the back of the building, near a drain. Struggling, Izuku reached for his chest and vanished into a cloud of red mist, reappearing without injuries before promptly losing consciousness. As he rested in his natural form, Nezu turned to All Might, commanding him to follow to his office with a dark tone. All Might, looking apprehensive, complied. Once inside, Nezu jumped down and prepared tea, a seemingly normal action that masked his growing anger. He instructed All Might to sit down, his fur bristling slightly. All Might opened his mouth to speak but was cut off by Nezu, who insisted they wait for another guest. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nezu pressed a button beneath his desk, and the door swung open to reveal a worried Eri and Inko. He invited them to sit and offered tea, pouring a cup for Inko and a bottle of apple juice for Eri, who had Nezu wrapped around her finger. With concern etched on her face, Inko took a sip of her tea. Inko asked if everything was all right, and Nezu regrettably informed her that Izuku and his classmates had been attacked by a group of villains at the USJ. He explained that Izuku had defeated a Nomu, taking a moment to sigh and offer an apologetic look. The emotions on Inko's face shifted from fear to sadness and then to anger. She questioned how this was possible, believing Overhaul was the sole creator of such beings. Nezu raised a hand to interrupt, clarifying that while the villains had a Nomu, Izuku had defeated it just as All Might arrived. He added that Izuku would have been fine, but All Might had placed quirk suppressants on him and attempted to arrest him. Inko's head snapped to All Might, her expression filled with disbelief. She exclaimed in shock at All Might's actions. As he attempted to defend himself, Nezu interjected, pointing out All Might's arrogance. All Might looked confused, only to feel a sharp pain in his heart as he met Inko's fierce gaze. Her eyes glowed faintly green, and she threatened that if he called her son a criminal again, she would stop his heart. Nezu nodded in agreement, emphasizing that had All Might paid closer attention to the students' files, he would have realized that Izuku was at UA under the condition of leaving his past behind. He had a special license to operate as a legal vigilante until he obtained his hero license, Nezu explained. Just as All Might was about to respond, Nezu added that he had searched, filed, convinced, and approved him for this role. All Might paled, realizing the extent of his mistake. After the break, most of Class 1A was present. Out of the original 20 students, only 18 remained in the room. 3 had been expelled and replaced by 2 new students, but only one of them, Toga Himiko, made it to class. She had been skipping most of her classes to spend time with Touya, but Inko insisted she attend to support Izuku if he needed it. Today, the students, minus Shoto Todoroki, who remained silent, were discussing the USJ incident and Anubis. Jirou expressed her hope that Anubis would make it to class, as she had been worried since witnessing Izuku's injuries and hearing his screams. Momo placed a comforting hand on Jirou's shoulder, sharing her concerns about his condition. Mina, however, was optimistic, stating that Midoriya, the famed god of Mustafu, would not let his injuries stop him. Kirishima praised Midoriya's bravery, emphasizing how he had saved everyone and ensured the teacher's safety. Tsuyu raised a question that had been on her mind, wondering if Midoriya might be a spy. The class fell silent, contemplating her words until Toga spoke up, assuring them that he was not a spy. She revealed that he had shared his past with her, Touya, and Eri, but warned that it was a difficult story to hear. Just then, Aizawa entered the room, his arm wrapped up, accompanied by Izuku. He informed the class that both he and Anubis were fine and that Izuku would answer any questions they had. Aizawa instructed them to raise their hands and assured them that if anyone felt overwhelmed, they could leave for Class 1B, where Vlad would be prepared for any situation. He then settled down on the floor behind his desk. As Izuku entered, all eyes turned to him. Before he could speak, Jirou rushed forward, colliding with him in a tight embrace, expressing her relief and concern over his well-being. After a moment, she let go, wiped her eyes, and returned to her seat, blushing slightly. Izuku took a deep breath and addressed the class, asking who would be the first to ask a question. Tsuyu raised her hand and bluntly inquired if he was a spy. Izuku calmly assured her that he was not. Ida then asked why it had appeared that he was using multiple quirks during the fight. Izuku explained that he currently housed over 20 quirks within him, causing a stir among the class. Momo raised her hand, her expression shifting to one of fear as she realized the implications of his words. She backed away from Izuku, exclaiming that he was a Nomu. panic spread through the class, but Izuku silenced them with a piercing glare, commanding them to sit down. Feeling that his human form was too much to maintain, Izuku shifted back to his natural state and sat on Aizawa's desk, rubbing his snout with a heavy sigh. He confirmed Momo's fears, revealing that he was Nomu 001, the first human capable of housing multiple quirks and retaining sentience. He paused as another hand shot up, knowing the question that was coming would be difficult for Bakugo. Bakugo scowled, clenching his fist as he confronted Izuku. He demanded to know what had happened to his best friend, the Deku he once knew, and why he no longer remembered him. Izuku sighed, reminding the class that if it became too much, they could leave for 1B. He began recounting his past, starting from when he was diagnosed as quirkless at the age of 4. He described the tragic accident that led to his abduction and the years of training he endured to develop his quirk, which allowed him to steal and give away quirks at will. He spoke of the harsh treatment he received during that time, though he could not recall the details himself. As he continued, he warned the class that the story would take a darker turn, beginning with small injuries inflicted upon him to test his abilities. This would continue until Izuku reached a point of quirk exhaustion, at which time they would conduct an autopsy on his body while he was awake, ignoring his cries and whimpers. All his organs were removed, experimented on, and then painfully returned to his body. The only reason he survived was due to a life-sustaining quirk he was forced to take from a kind gentleman. This quirk kept his brain and heart alive. As long as he retained a portion of his brain and heart, he could rebuild his body. At this, Koda, Sato, and Mina left the room looking pale. In Class 1B's classroom, Vlad King was about to start a lesson when the door flew open, and 3 visibly shaken students rushed in, nearly sick. With a gentle smile, he addressed his class, warning them with a glare not to say a word. Minoma nodded shakily in response. He inquired if Izuku had begun explaining his past, receiving only the sight of the 3 huddled together in tears. Back with Class 1A, Izuku continued, explaining that this ordeal would happen every day until every organ in his body had been experimented on and returned. Looking around, he offered a soft expression to the crying Bakugo and nodded as more of the squeamish classmates left, leaving only 8 students behind. After everything that happened, he revealed that he had been killed, and his memory had been wiped clean. He gazed out the window as he recounted waking up in a jar, floating in some kind of liquid for the last 3 years. There, he learned he was no longer human but a child soldier, given to an ex-villain named Overhaul, who now enjoyed the company of darkness. He trained Izuku on other quirks and physically, somewhat. He discovered that Eri was being experimented on, and although he had no memories of his past, the feelings of rage surged within him. He stole Overhaul's quirk, defeated him, and rescued Eri before leveling the building into countless pieces. Soon after, he became a vigilante, and Nezu caught wind of him, convincing him, Eri, his mother, and his adoptive brother to move to the UA dorms with the Toga family. He mentioned that everyone except his brother had met them. His brother had a grudge he was working on and a family to save, so he would be around soon, hopefully. As he finished his story, his classmates swarmed him, and everyone from Class 1A joined in a hug. Izuku appreciated the feeling of everyone around him, including a punk goth girl who hugged him tightly, as if fearing he would disappear. Maybe this was a good idea after all. He still needed to have a chat with Kaken later. Wait, who was Kaken? Izuku collapsed to the floor, with Jirou helping him down gently. He gripped his head as repressed memories pounded within him, like a prisoner trying to escape. In an attempt to alleviate the pain, he began to rock back and forth, unaware of the petite girl holding him with concern. He mumbled repeatedly about Kaken, prompting Jirou to turn to Bakugo, the only person who might know. She called out to him, asking who Kaken was so they could bring him here. Bakugo's shocked, wide-eyed expression caught her attention. He shouted for her to move closer, and she complied, giving him a stern look as she did. Bakugo reached up to help Izuku move his hands away from his head and turned his face toward him. In a gentle tone that surprised everyone, he spoke softly while holding Izuku's hand. He asked if Izuku knew why he called that person Kaken. When Izuku shook his head, Bakugo continued, explaining that it was because Izuku had spoken before he did, and Katsuki was too much for him to say, so he called him Kaken. Izuku whispered the name as red eyes seemed to stare back at him. Bakugo nodded, and Jirou looked annoyed, urging him to call Kaken if he knew him. Bakugo simply clicked his tongue at her before turning back to Izuku. He explained that Izuku couldn't call someone who was right there because he was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku shakily raised his hand and brushed Katsuki's cheek, asking if he was Big Bro Kaken. That exact phrase echoed in his mind. Katsuki did not cry. He was sweating from the effort of being so gentle. He held back tears as a single memory flashed, and recognition appeared in Izuku's once normal eyes. Before he could prepare himself, he was suddenly embraced by a man who hugged him with the biggest smile Katsuki had ever seen. After everything calmed down, class ended, and they moved on to the next set of classes. When foundational heroics began, Nezu walked in, greeting the students. He explained that since All Might was still recovering from his fight, they had assigned a substitute. He ushered in Atsuhiro Seiko, otherwise known as the underground hero, Compress, and reminded everyone to be on their best behavior before disappearing like the cryptid he was. Compress, or Seiko-sensei as he preferred to be called, made the class extremely informative. Instead of focusing on brute force training, he took the class on a brief trip to Gym Gamma. There, he explained the differences between hero and vigilante laws, detailing how each category functioned. He shared that he was legally recognized as both a vigilante and a hero, known as a vigilante hero. Seiko-sensei elaborated that vigilante heroes occupied a gray area within the HPSC, often regarded as the true underground heroes. He broke down how each division was selected and how they earned a living. He explained the categories: Spotlight, Limelight, Underground, and Vigilante. Spotlight heroes were compensated based on their ranking and popularity, receiving significant donations from fans. Limelight heroes, like the pro-hero present Mike, balanced stable jobs with their hero work, often juggling multiple jobs. Underground heroes operated away from the media, earning a salary with bonuses based on their capture rates and the danger they posed to the public. Finally, vigilante heroes faced the toughest challenges, with many quitting after their first major case, as they were paid on a case-by-case basis. Izuku nodded at this information and asked how many students were interested in becoming vigilantes. About half the class raised their hands, and Izuku felt it was essential to show them the reality of the situation. He activated a memory duplication quirk, projecting images from his hands to reveal the truths of the underground vigilante world. 2 days after his escape, Izuku, fully dressed as Anubis, walked the streets late at night, navigating the worst part of Mustafu. The buildings were in disrepair, and as he moved down the street, he heard a cry that sounded like a woman in distress. Rushing toward the voice, he encountered a disturbing scene. A large man was holding a young boy down, having torn the boy's clothes. As the man prepared to continue his actions, he was interrupted by the sound of growling. Anubis growled, expressing his outrage at the man's actions. With a snap of his fingers, the boy vanished, appearing safely behind him. Anubis noticed the boy was dirty and had visible injuries. The boy, traumatized, ran away after Anubis handed him a blanket. It didn't take long for Anubis to subdue the assailant, ensuring he was incapacitated before the police arrived. Following the boy's scent, Anubis found him in a small alley beneath a 10-story building. There, he discovered 3 significant items: a letter thanking Anubis for saving him but expressing the boy's feelings of being tainted, a pair of red shoes meant for the quirkless, and a disturbing scene that hinted at the boy's tragic fate. The class stood in shock, sadness, and disgust after witnessing the projection. If this was the reality of the vigilante world, none of them wanted to be part of it. As they sat together, trying to process their emotions, Momo and Jirou hugged Izuku, sharing in their fear and regret. The atmosphere was heavy with silence until Azui broke it, bluntly asking Izuku if he had saved the boy. Izuku nodded, grimacing as he explained that while he had brought the boy back, he was not the same. He had given the boy a peaceful end and cremated his remains for his family, providing them with closure despite their grief. Seiko-sensei then reminded the class that heroics didn't guarantee saving everyone before dismissing them for the day. Back in the dorms, Inko had seen what had transpired at Izuku's request. Wanting to lift everyone's spirits, she and Sato prepared custom-made food for the group, which helped cheer them up, except for one punk girl who kept glancing toward a specific room. Inko softly mentioned that the boy felt guilty for the loss of the child, suggesting that someone should comfort him. After clearing her thoughts, the punk girl decided to reach out to him, recalling how he had comforted her in the past. As she approached the stairs, a small hand grabbed her coat, playfully threatening her if she hurt her father. The girl's words were innocent yet firm. The punk girl reassured the child that she cared for him deeply before entering his room, finding him in a vulnerable state. She reached out to rub his back, offering comfort. Izuku, overwhelmed with emotion, pulled Jirou into his lap, holding her close as he cried into her shoulder. She whispered soft words to him, providing solace as he gradually calmed down over the next 20 minutes. He began to apologize, but Jirou gently corrected him, sharing her name softly as she laid her head on his shoulder. Kyoka introduced herself, blushing a deep red, and asked Izuku not to apologize. He responded softly, inviting her to call him Izuku. They shared a comforting embrace, both feeling the weight of their past struggles and pain. After a while, the sound of snickering and a camera shutter broke the moment. They turned to see Bakugo, Dabi, and Himiko laughing at them. Toga teased Kyoka about her comfort, prompting more laughter from the boys, with Dabi adding his own playful howls. Kyoka, feeling embarrassed as she realized her position on Izuku's lap, quickly climbed off and chased after the giggling Toga down the hall. Izuku stood up, noticing the shift in his demeanor. He was no longer the heartbroken boy but had transformed into a determined vigilante, a fierce glint in his eyes as he pursued the two boys who had darted away in laughter. Throughout the night, anyone passing by the dorms would hear the joyful chaos of laughter, playful screams, and the sounds of a spirited chase, all blending into a lively atmosphere. The next morning, Aizawa entered the dorms for his morning check-ins and was surprised to find 3 students hanging from the ceiling while 2 others slept on the couch, clutching a phone. Upon glancing at the phone, he understood why the 3 were suspended. He nodded to himself and made his way to Inko's room. She opened the door with a warm smile and offered him coffee, acknowledging that he likely had questions. Aizawa accepted the coffee, stating that he had seen the photos and asked if they needed to keep an eye on the 2 students. Inko reassured him that she didn't think it was necessary but would ensure Izuku was prepared for anything. They spent a few hours discussing various topics over coffee until the door swung open suddenly. Izuku burst in, urgently announcing that he had heard his name being called. He shifted his form and pulled out his staff. Inko exchanged a glance with Aizawa, who encouraged Izuku to be safe. As Izuku vanished in a cloud of smoke, Inko chuckled, reaching for her phone, only to be playfully ensnared by Aizawa's scarf. Meanwhile, in another part of town, a little girl huddled in a corner of the gym, wearing a torn shirt and skirt, her red shoes scuffed. She was crying, curled up as her classmates bullied her. Aldera High, known for being affordable and one of the few high schools near UA, harbored a dark secret. While they accepted quirkless students, most did not last beyond the first year. The truth was grim. Many of these students faced severe bullying, with some tragically taking their own lives. Today was no exception, as teachers watched from the stands while the girl endured abuse. Had she possessed a quirk, she would have been celebrated for her beauty, but instead, she was alone in a boarding school with no one to turn to for help. She kept murmuring for Anubis, a mysterious figure her aunt had told her about, who had once saved her uncle. Desperate for help, she continued to plead for his presence. One boy mocked her, claiming Anubis was not real, while another joined in, ridiculing her further. As she wiped her tears, she insisted Anubis existed. Just then, the lights flickered, and the gym doors slammed shut, locking themselves. A voice echoed ominously, declaring that those who used their power for pleasure and pain would face judgment. The girl smiled, sensing Anubis's arrival. As smoke filled the gym, a pair of toxic green eyes emerged. The girl and Izuku spoke as one, declaring his name, Anubis. It took Izuku nearly an hour, but he managed to subdue most of the students and teachers, leaving them unconscious or in a state of shock. He knelt beside the girl, his expression softening as he assessed her injuries. He introduced himself as Anubis, apologizing for the delay in his arrival. The girl, Akami Takahashi, thanked him softly. He asked about her injuries, and she indicated her arm and face. As he reached out to help her up, she flinched, instinctively crossing her legs. Izuku recognized the signs of quirkless discrimination and sensed something deeper was troubling her. He gently inquired if she felt safe at home, noticing her expression shift to one of fear. He assured her that he wanted her to come with him to meet a friend who could help her. Izuku wanted to understand the extent of her injuries. The shock in her eyes revealed that she hadn't expected him to know what had happened. She hesitated, asking if she would be judged. He reassured her that she wouldn't be alone, as he would be there throughout the process. With a gentle smile, he lifted her carefully and let his smoke envelop them, disappearing just as the police arrived. They found a room filled with secured students and teachers, with a box in the center marked with 3 letters. It had been over an hour since Izuku returned to UA. Akami was in the RG office undergoing a full physical. Outside the door, Izuku recounted the events to Kyoka, who listened intently as he described the confrontation and his swift escape. A light tap from Kyoka signaled him to stand as the door opened, revealing a grim-faced RG. Izuku softly inquired about Akami's condition. RG sighed deeply, explaining that she had a broken arm, a dislocated shoulder, and a severe concussion. She had also discovered multiple broken ribs and hairline fractures in her legs and wrist. RG's expression darkened as she noted the bruising on Akami's hips, shaped like hands gripping her from behind. In a soft voice, she revealed that Akami was also PRGNT. Izuku felt a surge of anger and concern, asking if he could see her. RG nodded, mentioning that Akami had been asking for him since he left, indicating a strong bond had formed between them. Nodding in understanding, Izuku entered the room as RG closed the door behind him to give them privacy. He greeted Akami softly, noticing her sadness as she ran her hand over her stomach. She expressed her confusion and distress about the situation, feeling trapped between her feelings about the PRG and CY. Izuku offered her a few options, knowing he had quirks that could help her. He explained that he could heal her completely, use a quirk that would remove the baby, or rewind her body to before the PRG and CY occurred. He also mentioned the possibility of altering her memories if she wished. Akami's eyes widened at the choices. The idea of being healed and having a loving family was appealing. Without hesitation, she asked him to be her brother. Smiling, Izuku embraced her, adjusting her memories to reflect a different narrative, one where she had made a mistake with a boy who left her alone after she discovered her PRG. As her tears subsided, her injuries began to heal. Curious, she asked what she should call him now. He encouraged her to choose a name she felt comfortable with, revealing that his name was Izuku but she could call him anything. She decided on Oni-chan and asked what would happen next. Izuku helped her stand, explaining that they would go to their dorms where she could meet her new siblings. 2 weeks had passed since Izuku brought Akami to the dorms, with Nezu's approval. She quickly became part of the family. Dabi, upon learning about her past, became fiercely protective. Toga and Akami formed a close friendship, with Toga excitedly talking about being an aunt. Eri was also delighted, often seen being carried around by Akami, much to the amusement of the others, including Inko, who enjoyed capturing the moments on camera. During those 2 weeks, Izuku and Class 1A trained hard, and now it was time for the sports festival. As the class gathered in their ready room, Todoroki approached Izuku. He stated that logically he was stronger and would defeat him that day. Izuku simply snorted, teasing Todoroki about needing to bring his full potential to stand a chance against him. Before anyone could respond, the buzzers sounded, signaling the start of the event. As Izuku walked past Kyoka, she grabbed his shoulder, urging him to win and hinting at a reward. He stood there momentarily shocked, recalling their recent dates and time spent together, realizing this was a new level of intimacy for him. Shaking off his surprise, he followed his classmates out, transforming into his human form. As he walked, Principal Nezu stopped him, requesting a quick word. With a glint of mischief in his eyes, he presented a special quirk nullification bracelet, explaining that the staff had decided it was necessary due to Izuku's numerous quirks. It would not disable any of your life support quirks, but it would limit your offensive and defensive quirks to 3 per round. To make this more challenging, that quirk would be disabled for the rest of the festival. He spoke softly. Nodding, Izuku accepted the bracelet, acknowledging that it seemed fair since most students could only use 1 quirk. Even using 3 felt unfair to him. Chuckling, Nezu nodded in agreement. While it was true, he mentioned that word about Izuku was spreading. He then posed a question, asking if Izuku wanted to make an entrance and demonstrate that UA was protected, a sinister smirk creeping across his face. Izuku's curiosity was piqued, and he asked what Nezu had in mind. As the event began, Yamada Hisashi, known as Present Mike, announced the other classes, inviting applause for the business students. The students made their way to the field, and Kyoka heard familiar voices in the crowd. Eri asked where Izuku was, and Aramai mentioned he couldn't see him. Kyoka began to worry, prompting the rest of Class 1A to search for him. Present Mike continued his energetic announcements, introducing the lovely R-rated heroine, Midnight. As she began her speech, the lights flickered, and smoke filled the building. A mysterious voice echoed, acknowledging the struggles of the students while hinting at their potential. The voice spoke of various quirks, causing mixed reactions among the audience. Midnight stood at the podium, shocked, as the feeds zoomed in on her. Suddenly, a pair of toxic green eyes appeared, and the Vigilante Anubis emerged from the mist. He declared that everyone was there for a common goal, to save those around them, including the silent, the lost, the villainous, and the monsters. He proclaimed unity among UA, urging everyone to go beyond. The crowd erupted into cheers, shouting, "Plus Ultra," as Izuku made his way to the entryway, a smirk on his face. He shared a quick, friendly gesture with Kyoka before preparing for the race. The first event was a 4 kilometers course around the sports field, with unknown hazards making Izuku contemplate which 3 quirks to use. Deciding to run across the course while activating quirks as needed, he tensed his muscles as the lights changed. When the light turned green, he shot forward, leaping over other students who were caught in the corridor. He smirked as he passed Todoroki, who attempted to slow the others down. Present Mix's voice echoed as Izuku landed on the field, quickly taking the lead. The first obstacle was a group of robots, ranging from 2-pointers to 0-pointers. With a determined grin, Izuku activated Overhaul, using it to dismantle the robots and clear his path. As he plowed through the obstacles, Present Mike announced his progress, noting that Todoroki had frozen his legs to take first place, with Bakugo right behind him. Aizawa, sharing the booth with his loud husband, commented on Izuku's prowess. Izuku chuckled, allowing Todoroki to pass him while he strategized on how to break free without injury. Using Overhaul at key points, he freed himself and resumed running, determined to catch up. Pushing his muscles to their limits, he quickly moved up to 5th place, overtaking Ida, who was cooling down. As he passed Jirou, he playfully acknowledged her with a gentle gesture, prompting her to react with surprise. Approaching a massive cavern known as the Fall, he assessed his options. Deciding against the ropes and small pillars, he activated a quirk called Perfect Balance, which he had acquired from a woman who had explained its challenges in her line of work. With his newfound balance and natural speed, he took off, ready to tackle the next challenge. As the contestants worked on crossing the fall, Present Mike announced the current standings, noting Todoroki in 1st place, followed by Bakugo, and then, was that Midoriya? Izuku was running across the wire effortlessly, showcasing his impressive skills. He smiled as he passed Todoroki, who quickly adapted his strategy. Instead of jumping from platform to platform, Todoroki created a bridge and dashed across. Bakugo launched himself forward, using explosions to propel himself across the ravine. The 3 heavy hitters were soon in pursuit of one another. As they approached a sand pit, Izuku was the first to notice the warning signs. Wanting to have some fun, he activated Shock Absorption, the only quirk he had taken from the Nomu. With this ability active, Izuku charged through the minefield, creating a path for the others as the mines detonated around him. He focused solely on winning, crossing the finish line just as he passed the last of the mines. The announcer declared Izuku as the winner, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Todoroki and Bakugo, who were battling for second place, crossed the line with Bakugo narrowly ahead. It didn't take long for the other participants to finish the race. Once midnight announced the conclusion, they were sent back to their ready room to await the next event. Izuku sat at one of the tables, enjoying a high-protein bar when Kyoka, Ochako, Ida, Bakugo, and Tsu joined him. Ochako asked what he thought the next event would be, while Izuku speculated that it would likely be a team-based challenge, hoping it wouldn't be a cavalry battle, which he considered overused. Tsu expressed her desire to be on a team with Izuku, while Ida remarked on the strategic advantages of teamwork. Bakugo, with a competitive spirit, declared he would outshine everyone, though there was no real malice in his tone. Izuku shared rumors of an urban-based team battle or a Capture the Hills-style event. As they chatted, Izuku felt Todoroki's intense glare directed at him, likely stemming from his earlier declaration of rivalry. Their conversation was interrupted by Mike announcing that all students participating in the second event should make their way to the field. Excited, Izuku's group stood up, and Kyoka playfully grabbed his hand, giving him a quick kiss. She teased that she wouldn't be on his team if it was a team battle, wanting to face him herself. Izuku chuckled, following her out while trying to ignore the way she walked, which was clearly meant to fluster him. The student body gathered outside, where Midnight stood on her podium. She asked if they were ready for the next event, and the crowd roared in response. With a flick of her wrist, the wheel spun, slowing down to reveal the next challenge: capture the flag. Midnight explained the rules, stating that students would form 8 teams of 4, with each team leader responsible for their flag. The challenge would be to gather flags while protecting their own. Izuku's excitement grew as he learned that, due to his first-place finish, his team was chosen randomly, and he would have to defend 2 flags. Midnight announced his teammates: Hitoshi Shinso, Hatsume, and Kirishima Ijiro. She handed Izuku his flags and some earbuds, and then gave them 15 minutes to devise a battle plan. Hitoshi pointed out a mansion with a concrete maze behind it as a strategic location. Izuku reminded him that he could only use 1 quirk per day for the festival, which led to some playful banter among the group. They decided to send Kirishima and Mei into the maze to hold off their classmates while Izuku and Hitoshi would stealthily operate from the mansion. 15 minutes later, Izuku and Hitoshi hid inside the mansion, disabling the power and filling the house with smoke. Meanwhile, Kirishima and Mei had planted their flag in the center of the maze, setting up traps to deter any challengers. As the countdown ended, Midnight shouted for the event to begin. Over the next few minutes, Kirishima defended their position while Mei incapacitated or captured students who ventured too close. Inside the mansion, Izuku and Shinso awaited the first arrival. It wasn't long before Shiozaki entered, immediately whispering quiet prayers as she scouted the area. She soon turned down a hallway, only to be met by glowing green eyes. A voice called out, announcing the presence of a newcomer. Shiozaki's eyes dulled, and she stood completely still. Shinso instructed her to report to her team that the mansion was empty and then to go to sleep. Obediently, she complied, collapsing into a deep slumber. This pattern continued until the end of the hunt, with Izuku's team maintaining all their points through flags. They ultimately secured first place and were told to return to their seats for a brief recess. While the students enjoyed lunch, a hero was hard at work. Deep in the back alleys of Hosu, Ingenium, also known as Ida Tensei, was pursuing reports of the hero killer. He had received a tip about the villain targeting another hero in these alleys and was determined to intervene. As Ingenium rushed through the alleys, he felt the air shift and quickly dodged as a glint of metal flew past him, embedding itself in the wall. A brief glance back revealed a dagger lodged in the brick. Unfortunately, that moment was all Stain needed to launch an attack. As Tensei turned, he felt the cold blade of Stain's katana graze his cheek, leaving a mark. As Ingenium prepared to charge, Stain liked the blood from his sword, causing Tensei to freeze in place, collapsing to the ground beneath Stain's feet. While Stain ranted about hero society, Ingenium remembered a rumor and silently called for help, just as Stain's sword struck him again, leaving him unable to feel anything below the waist. During their lunch break, Izuku sensed a presence that felt out of place near UA. Sending a quick text to Aizawa, he vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving Todoroki in surprise. When Izuku emerged, he was clad in his Anubis attire, standing over Ingenium's paralyzed form, crimson liquid seeping from his back as he silently endured the pain. Anubis snarled Stain's name, and as the vigilante-turned-killer acknowledged him, Anubis prepared to attack. However, Stain, aware of Anubis's skills and the rumors surrounding him, threw a knife as a distraction and retreated to the rooftops. He threatened that they would meet again, vowing to defeat Anubis with his blade before disappearing into the city. Kneeling beside Ingenium, Anubis helped him lean against the wall. He offered 4 options for Ingenium's recovery: the use of Overhaul to restore his body, though it would be painful, rewinding his body to just before the attack, a basic healing quirk with no guarantee of full recovery, or assistance to the EMTs for traditional healing. Ingenium chuckled softly, expressing his desire to continue serving the city, as many looked up to him. He chose the rewind option. Nodding, Anubis gently removed his helmet and placed a hand on Ingenium's head. Slowly, he released his power, channeling energy into Tensei. The eldest Ida brother felt his spine realign, the scars healing as his body rewound to just before Stain's attack. Once the task was complete, Anubis instructed Ingenium to have a sidekick come pick him up and to inform his brother if anything felt wrong. With those final words, he vanished into smoke. Soon, it was time for the one-on-one matches, and Ingenium needed to shower and prepare for the upcoming battles.